Okay, good everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about this concept here, spirituality 2014. I've just put that 2014 there so that it just implies, that it's just regarding spirituality in the modern context of things today and how it's applicable as well and how important it is as well. Right. Without any further ado, I'm just going to begin. Okay, the first slide here, right, we've got, what it's showing on the left is you should look here. What's this thing is basically, obviously, it's about the concept of reincarnation, right? And just look at here, for instance, you've got this little white thing, it's meant to be the peddly little soul or whatever it is. Just an energy form that's constantly sort of moving, from one body to the next, and people call this by the name of soul. And then, I mean, whatever it is, it's meant to be an energy, and it's sort of a eternal, undying consciousness of energy sort of thing that is within each and every life form. Okay, that's the idea. I mean, I understand that, and today it doesn't make any sense for many people if they're particularly scientific and they don't really have an appreciation for reincarnation or any concept like that. And it's understandable. But I'm just here, just as yourself, just a seeker trying to understand sort of the eternal truths, really eternal spiritual truths, and things that probably science has never yet sort of understood because of their, limited understanding in some things, which they don't probably would like to admit that. But yeah, I mean, given that fact, okay, if you don't believe in reincarnation, fair enough, but my suggestion is, I mean, it's probably something that you'd want to investigate. You can, I mean, we are all busy with our lives generally. If you're busy, that's good. But it's not bad to once in a while to ponder on these questions. See, one who doesn't ponder these questions, doesn't want to seek the answers, and just wants to believe in whatever he chooses to believe, then he's kind of limited, isn't it? Your knowledge is limited. I mean, say you might have some religious background, or you do it, you don't have much faith, but you just do it as a cultural thing, and that's what majority of the world population does today. But they don't really seek to understand what's the real truths behind it. I mean, someone says, okay, this is the truth, and we just kind of quote unquote blindly believe in whatever people say. We don't wish to take that next step further and try to investigate, and that really makes the difference. Say from a yogi and the rest of the crowd, what the difference is that they are actually practical, spiritual seekers. They try to experience the spiritual truths within, quote unquote, and that's kind of probably what I believe to be the essence of all, quote unquote, religions that sort of has come into a different phase now, where it's all mostly, quarreling or, fighting between each other. That's sort of a misunderstanding that's led to such a deplorable state of humanity that's today. Anyway, so yeah, this is just the reincarnation stage. And I mean, I'm just got this book here. It's called Children Who Remember Previous Lives, A Question of Reincarnation. And if it was just a theory, then there wouldn't be any sort of evidence. But there are some evidence, and there's quite a bit. The more you search, you'll probably find out more. And this is probably one of the more documented, proper, research that's been done by this guy called Ian Stevenson. He's an MD. So he's a proper doctor, and he spent most of his, I guess, latest phases of his life to understand this concept of reincarnation. And interestingly, it looks like the more he did research and the more he dug out information, the more convincing it became that this concept actually was most likely true. And he's a professional doctor, right? But he independently investigated this without being, under some sort of a delusional thing. So his books and his information here, Children Who Remember Previous Lives, it's probably a read you'd like to read through. I mean, it's for people who don't believe in it, especially. If you believe in it, fair enough, that's good, I guess, but I don't know. But still, I mean, if you wish to learn more and understand a bit more, it's probably a good thing to start. So yeah, it's a good text, I guess, for people, especially in the West, who are not familiar with this and have this own sort of a perception or vision of what reality is, as opposed to finding out, what the truth is. Okay, yeah. So I mean, that's his book, and he's found is obviously he's found that a lot of children are able to use them. A lot of in different parts of the world, they considered a bit weird, but they actually were able to, to remember previous lives pretty vividly, and it was quite stunning. But there are even videos on YouTube if you want to search, and you'll find out that as well. Okay. The next slide here is about basically it's a picture that I've taken out from this organization called SSRF. It's called Spiritual Research Foundation.org or SSRF.org. It's a very good website that provides sort of independent understanding on this matter. And well, what it is, okay, like the concept here is that, say, every individual, like you and I, whoever we are, we generally, as if we, how do we, determine ourselves, if we just limit ourselves to say that we're just our body, then that's really just a, very limited sort of understanding of limited definition, should I say, of who we are really, because we're all kind of different, aren't we? I mean, we probably have different bodies, but that's not the only thing. What differs from each one of us is our sort of mindset, that defines, quote unquote, who we are. And that's a very good thing. It's the more we delve into that matter of who we are, we tend to understand who we really are, but we don't really search for that. And considering that we're just a consciousness, assuming that there's this consciousness that determines who we are, and just the same similar consciousness that determines every other individual. So if we're just an individual consciousness, what tends to happen is that in the subtle dimension, that's what they call them, but you don't have to believe it because you've never seen it. And for something that you've never seen, I don't enforce people to believe in, because that's kind of blind belief that I don't like people to get into, But assuming that you're just a consciousness, you know who you are. But what tends to happen is that you need to understand, and you probably know this already, it's no rocket science here, that if you're just a consciousness, within a body, whatever thoughts that go through your mind on a day-to-day basis, right? Whatever thoughts, that really is the sum and substance of who you really are, isn't it? I mean, if you don't consider yourself just a body, if you just consider yourself just a body, then, well, that's probably up to you, but it doesn't really make sense, because you know that there's something that's you, within, that's you, you know that you're you. It's just something that you need to know, that you're yourself. You're not just a body. You just need to just switch off your mindset and just try to understand it. Just go back and just see that if you're just a body, then how come you would have all these, dreams, for instance, or whatever? When you go to sleep, you're not the body, but you're still having these thoughts, and these thoughts are coming alive, aren't they? So if you're just a body, then you would be completely limited with everything, okay? But if you know that even if you go to sleep and you're still dreaming, and you can have these vivid emotions in dreams, or vivid perceptions in dreams, so what does that mean? That means that you just couldn't be just a body. Well, it's up to you how you want to look at it, but just a very logical way to think about it. The dreams just give you the indication, it's the evidence that we're not just bodies. And then okay, so that's assuming that that's the case. You're just assuming you're a consciousness. Now, what tends to happen is that majority of people, in this planet, are filled with sort of quote unquote baggage and negative emotions or negative things. If you just observe your thoughts, you'll probably know that. It doesn't take that long to realize that we're just full of garbage. We're filled with things like media in this age, and all things that mechanize things or whatever. It's not natural, all these things that we fill ourselves with, from people garbage, or discussions here and there, etc. And what that tends to do, apparently, is in the subtle dimension. That's what they say, is that it tends to create this negative sort of energy around us, because basically, if we're just the sum and substance of thoughts, and you fill yourself with negative thoughts, what happens is that you tend to, attract these negative vibrations across, and then therefore we just, covered with all this negative vibrations, known as which is the black energy covering. That's what they call them. And within all of this black energy, what is it basically? The core of the black energy is actually representing your ego, the individual ego. Okay, so anything that you say, this I am me, this is me, and you tend to attach things with yourself, whatever, all these things, your thought patterns, etc. The sum and substance of all of that negative energy is actually, the reason behind it is your ego. And then what it's saying is that in the center of all that, there's this thing called the divine consciousness. That is also known as the soul, quote unquote, or the pure energy, right? Or whatever it is. It's just the essence of who we are, assuming that that essence is, quote unquote, the same as the divine energy that resides within every living being, right? And that's the essence of really this slide here, Now, what is the soul? Really, the soul, it's hard to understand everything, but the soul is considered to be the God principle, the God particle that sort of exists in every sort of consciousness. It's like, understand this as the energy, it's probably just assume this as the primordial energy that is part of the initial creation of the universe, and the energy has a particular vibration known as Om. It's something that you probably don't want to not believe it, but again, it's something that you can investigate. When the scientists have done this research and they've found out that, okay, the universe at the time of creation, expanded rapidly, and the sound and the vibration it gave off was actually known as, it's recorded, and then that sound is actually considered to be Om. Right, so it's part of the primordial sound of creation, the primordial energy of creation, the primordial energy itself, and it's just capable to do anything. And it's also, assuming that is actually what the divine is, which is purity, really. The rest is just ego, which is rubbish. That things that clutters our mind. So the goal of spiritual evolution, of spirituality, really is the transition from all this garbage that we collect ourselves, and removal of all these negative, it's called in Sanskrit, vasanas and sanskaras. The removal of negative attachments and ego, whatever you call it, disillusionments. It's not the reality, because the reality is the source energy always, isn't it? And this is known as God, actually, the God principle. So what happens is that through practice over time, one is able to slowly dissociate or remove all these samskaras, because you don't tend to be attached to these anymore. And then what happens is that the natural energy source, the pure energy, which is also pure, the pure source, tends to prevail more and more around you, and the negative just goes away. This is a positive, and that's your negative sort of thing. And the idea is eventually, you'll be at a stage of your evolution life. Because think about this: if you believe in reincarnation, every time we accumulate things, every lifetime, and then people die and reborning because of that. We have to. The reincarnation cycle never ends, apparently, according to that concept, until we remove all this ego. And then finally, when you remove all ego, there is no more ego left, and there's no more dark energy left, and then you truly know who you are. And this is known as the concept of, quote unquote, God realization, or quote unquote self-realization. And that is the ultimate goal of, apparently, spirituality, is that you understand the source energy itself, and the source energy knows you completely, and you become one with the source, and you become, quote unquote, free from this concept known as reincarnation or endless suffering, or baggage of suffering. I mean, it's very well, accepted in the dharmic religions in the East, and not quite so much in the West in the terms of the Abrahamic religions. They tend to believe in the supreme, almighty, divine, and that's fair enough. And it's just a different way of thinking, but ultimately, both parts lead to the same thing. So this is the freedom. This is part of the freedom sort of thing. And so that's what it is. Let's move to the next phase. Now the next slide is quite interesting. We've got here Lord Buddha. Obviously, he is one of the best proponents of the concept of reincarnation and eternal truths of dharma, etc. in the West. But basically, Buddhism sort of flourished in the West because of the certain principles that there is no sort of God or something like that, which kind of brought peace, I guess, acceptance in the Western communities, because they're more practical, and they don't want to see quote unquote experience. It's just a different way of thinking, but it doesn't matter. I mean, so the practice of Buddhism really flourished in the West because of that concept, and it was quite acceptable. Yet the practice wasn't really there. It's never been there really. It's just an illusion. And it's only very, very few people actually seriously practice Buddhism as such properly. But what we need to understand is that there is no such thing as Buddhism is better, or whatever, this Hinduism is better, or this is better, that better. There's only one truth, which is the spiritual truth. And the spiritual truth is the divine is existence within every living being. And every living being is quote unquote the divine itself. Right? So the concept of ahimsa means that, ahimsa means non-violence. How can one be violent against another individual who is also the divine? So it doesn't make any logical sense there. Anyway, this concept, the slide here particularly, is about aham brahmasmi, which means I am Brahman. Right? What does that mean? Okay, Brahman is in Sanskrit, it means I am God. That's what it really is saying. Okay, what does it mean? Okay, so think about it this way. It's saying that, and I've got a question mark here, aham brahmasmi. So why am I putting a question mark particularly? The question mark is there because I'm just trying to get people to understand that as soon as one believes even that I am God or something, because in the previous slide it showed that okay, everything, we have the God principle within us, so I'm God, and that's, many people have this ego suddenly, even in the dharmic religions, they've got this great ego thing that, okay, if I'm God or if I'm the divine, and it's practiced against Buddhist people mostly, or Hindus, I don't know, it doesn't matter. So what that concept is there, that I'm God, and then that really creates this ego again, because what happens is that if I'm God, I can do sort of anything I want, and that's not the case. We have certain, until we actually experience the divine within ourselves completely, the absolute experience is the wisdom to determine only that at that stage you can use this phrase here, I am Brahman. Otherwise it's quite meaningless, because at the stage you're not nothing until you experience entire truths, which is known as self-realization complete. Then you'll know it, and then when you know it, you don't need to say it. So it's just the irony. So people use those terms, but it's not true. And so yeah, many people tend to have this ego. So it's always, what we say is that the concept of self-surrender. In the Sanskrit text, it's known as Ishvari Pranidhana, which means surrendering yourself, surrendering your own ego. And the more you surrender to the divine, to whatever way, whatever means, what are you actually doing is you're actually removing your ego. That's all you're doing, and that's how you become peaceful. Okay? Any individual cannot just become peaceful if he does not know how to surrender, and it's one of the key principal teachings of the Ashtanga Yoga, which I'll talk about later, which is that very, very divine path, path towards perfection. Okay. The next slide here, just quickly, again from SSRF. It's a great website here. It's called spiritualresearchfoundation.org. You can probably visit it. It's pretty good. Okay, here we just got a brief slide about general life here, and as you can see, people get born, have friends, get sick, accidents, etc. Get married. Some people suffer, some people happy, education, whatever. This is just a typical human life, and people, okay, have ups and downs, and this is how they determine life, and they just go about just ignoring everything else because it's not interesting anymore. They just see what they are. That's it. This is a typical human being life. Now sometimes people tend to question this concept. It's also part of the same website. I just got some slides here because it was pretty good. So here, some people might ask, if this is a poor girl, say in Nepal or somewhere, and some might just say, okay, why would God make me a child of a poor family and the other child of a wealthy family? Because if in the West probably there's not much difference, but in some areas you'll see there's a bit of where there are differences, you'll see this particularly, and that's a valid question, right? But we'll see the answer to that very shortly. And here we got another question. Okay, this is a young girl. Okay, she's physically impaired from the very beginning. Her parents might ask her, okay, why my child is suffering like this, and why the other child is being so healthy? Doesn't make any sense. It's probably the same question that the child might ask. These are valid questions, and we'll try to understand them. Now, in order to understand it, we need to look at this concept known as karma. Okay, what it is. It's very simple, very logical. Okay, there's no, I'm not giving you any sort of a, teaching on something fantastical out there or something right out there. No, it's very simple, very logical. It's almost the same as what's known as Newton's third law of motion, basic physics. Doesn't have to be physics. Just every action has an equal and opposite reaction. That's all it is, isn't it? The same thing with karma. Every action. So what's happening is that this fellow is hitting a block, and he's not noticing this block. So what's happening is that one block hits the other, and the other goes on and on and on. And eventually, what happens? This block is going to hit him, but he's not aware of it, and he's not caring. He's not considerate of anything when he does his actions. He's just happy to push it. It's the same thing with all of us. We just, happy to do what we think is right at that particular moment, and the rest we don't care. And when we suffer for the consequences of what our own actions are, then we say, "Oh God, please help us." And that's the problem, I think. Okay, now we'll look here. Previous lifetime, next lifetime. All right. What's this slide showing? If you're assuming that you believe in the concept of reincarnation, there's still, you have doubts in your mind, and you still, just go through the videos and see how you feel. I'm not trying to, convince you that you should believe it. This is the way it is. It's up to you to really investigate within and think about it truthfully. Okay, previous lifetime, next lifetime. All right. Now, what he's saying is that, assuming there's a guy called, this guy A for Adam and B for Bob, so two guys here, right? Now, assuming that in the previous, assuming there's this thing called reincarnation, in their previous lives, they were really good buddies, so they were very close to each other, and they knew themselves very well, But what happened was that they had a real big argument, a big fight, whatever, and then what happened was that they had this big argument and they weren't happy. So, and what happened is that A sort of gave a really bad thing to B, so he maybe hurt him really bad, verbally or physically, whatever it is. And, he might have even, you never know, he might have killed him for some reason. Or just, it doesn't have to be killing, but he probably hurt him really bad. We had a big fight or whatever it is. What tend to happen is that, and then is that they don't realize that there's this thing called a negative account carried over. So if A really hurt B really badly, and then they both die obviously at some stage in their lives, there's this sort of a negative account created between each of them, isn't it? It just makes sense. It's a part of the karmic law. If every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and it should be true in every sort of a spiritual context. So because of that, these two people have to be sort of quote unquote reborn to settle those accounts. And that is the basic principles of karma. Okay, until they quote unquote settle those accounts, they're not free. You see, they cannot be free because the accounts have to be settled. It's like negative, negative, positive, positive. There's no harmony, sort of thing, isn't it? Just try to understand it in that way. Probably makes more sense. So therefore, they have to come back in the next lifetime. And so they got to be born on a similar stage as well. And then when they reincarnate together, it is the time for B to give that much amount of pain or whatever to settle that account. There has to be some way to settle it. That's the principles there. Right. Now, that was the case. So, but what actually happens is that this is path known as the spiritual practice, because assuming that that was the case, in one lifetime, we would probably have negative accounts with thousands or hundreds of people. You never know, Even the fact that you think of, say for instance, you walk on the street and you're lusting at lots of women. And even the same for a woman, she dressed provocatively and she's, doing negative things to other people, etc. They all create negative karmic relations. So that thing goes on forever. And in order to settle everything, it's almost impossible. The person has to be reincarnated, forever. It's an endless suffering. But no. What's actually, what they're saying here is that there's this path known as spiritual practice, and that's why we do spiritual practice. So what it is that you do spiritual practice such as meditation, chanting, and what it is that it's trying to receive divine energy. So divine grace is always there, right? It's all around always, because God is all pervasive energy. It doesn't matter. But that divine energy, the more we accumulate, the more we can get rid of the negative ego and attachments, and the black energy is dissipated. And because of that, what tends to happen is that the more spiritual practice you do, you're able to generate these positive vibrations and energy sources that actually sort of nullifies that energy, spiritual energy generated from the body, quote unquote, nullifies, the negative energy, and therefore it removes the negative impressions in the B's in Bob's mind. So Adam does the spiritual practice intensely, and as a result of that, all the negative attachments which he had with other individuals slowly will be gone, because the energy quote unquote balances out, sort of thing. So therefore the spiritual practice is very important. Otherwise you never tend to settle accounts, and you just keep building accounts over and over and over again, and there is no freedom. That's what the truth is. That's how it is. It's up to you how to believe it or not. Okay. Now that's an interesting thing, and assuming that you now understand a bit about the laws of karma, it's the same anything you do. So laws of karma would apply to even eating or anything you do. If it applies to your thoughts, then obviously it's going to apply to what actions you do. People are so blind. Now this fellow here, he thinks he's a monk, right? These three guys. And this is a sad part of human life at the moment. Humanity is that we quote unquote tend to surrender ourselves completely, and we say, okay, I'm a full monk now, and our actions don't comply with what we just said. So he's just complete lying thing, unfortunately. Why? Because now let's see what he's eating. He's probably eating lots of dead animals, fit, whatever it is. It's primarily the diet for most people, dead animals, dead fish, whatever, a non-vegetarian diet, quote unquote. Now, what he already probably knows, obviously, and it doesn't take any logical understanding. I mean, it doesn't take anything, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know this. The fact that, innocent animals are actually killed for the pleasures of the flesh, or pleasures of the taste, of people. Because the fact that we don't have to be, we don't have to depend on, say, for instance, meat, fish, or whatever it is, in a non-vegetarian diet, eggs or whatever. We can, quote unquote, eat pure vegetarian food and survive happily. We know that. Science probably say, oh, okay, no, there's more protein in this, and this is what a lot of people say. And it's just disillusionments, they're just trying to, promote the meat industry, etc. It's not the truth. There's a lot, we already know there's all these cholesterol, all these things, because nature was not designed for human beings to eat meat in the first place. But it's an argument there. I don't want to go through it. I mean, considering you got, obviously, if you're an ape primate, the apes, for instance, gorillas, none of them tend to be, eating meat regardless, but tend to be humans. Okay, probably think we're special, we're omnivores, etc. It doesn't matter. But the idea is that we need to understand the basics of, laws of karma, and part of that is practicing the path of ahimsa, known as non-violence. And part of non-violence is to detach especially from negative food. And considering that this animal, innocent animal like a chicken, for instance, was killed for the sheer pleasure of your own flesh, of your own, sheer pleasure is the flesh. So that's what it is. You just for your pleasure, you're just consuming this poor animal, and that's why it's being killed. So obviously, the suffering that this animals had is a direct link to you, because you're consuming it. You have obviously the person who kills it in the abattoir or whatever, he's going to suffer greatly, but you are also connected, because the reason he's killing it is because for your own pleasure, and that's a great sin which we don't tend to realize. And unfortunately, these people are meant to be sort of Buddhist monks or whatever they are. They tend, they're actually, in their teachings, they need to be following ahimsa. They know that's number one. Yet, this is the great disillusionment. And yes, it's an unfortunate thing that they accept these foods, and it's prevalent everywhere. I mean, this is just a small thing here. We have, religious people going out and, murdering millions of people. So the world has become, I don't know. Anyway, the next phase here is obviously, this is in Sanatana Dharma, really, which is part of what I call eternal religion of truth. I mean, again, you might think it's wrong, it's not true. That's obviously acceptable. I have nothing to say on that. You can believe in everything, and obviously it's not true. But this is a part of it's a Hindu sort of a belief system. It doesn't have to be, but what the idea behind Sanatana Dharma is actually to appreciate nature and to see nature as the divine. And it's basically the main essence, really, of spiritual practice, is that assuming that if every object if every living being was quote unquote divine, then obviously, even cows and buffaloes, etc., are divine. So the idea is that this should never be, harmed or things like that. That's the idea, principle. So everyone had and therefore they've worshipped the cow in terms of all these different gods and goddesses. It's just a creativity over time. It's happened over humanity. But what's happened these days is that people tend to forget all these things. I mean, they're happy when they're always happy when you have if you have a farm, that you're always happy because it's always good to be around animals, domesticated animals. But the problem is that eventually the thoughts just go negative, so the concept is that non-vegetarian diet is pretty bad, really. I mean, which we tend to indulge in, yes, all these things, it's pretty bad. So detachment is the key, really, to happiness. I mean, again, you might not believe in this, but through practice you'll see it. It's all about practice. But ones who don't practice will never be able to appreciate this, or never be able to appreciate the happiness stage that I will discuss later. All right. Yeah, again, the same thing. You see, these people are doing some religious sacrifices, and so basically all these things, like, he doesn't know how much sin he's going to commit. Especially, it's even worse when individuals, sacrifice animals for the sake of the divine, or for the sake of God, or whatever. It's the same thing. Like, okay, God tells me to go and, bomb this place, or etc. And it's that sort of an attitude, belief system that people have. Yeah, it is demonic, really. That's all it is. So it's just a picture again from SSRF. They're showing these negative vibrations. So they're saying that some foods emit this divine positive vibration, such as fruits and vegetables, And so they've got this negative, positive vibration, divine energies. So it's up to you to believe. It's something that if you've never seen it, don't have to believe, as I said. But you will see that, it's once you transition into especially a vegan sort of diet, you'll see the benefits in your own life. You tend to be, because it's all about consciousness and energies, So more, when you have everything's that's sort of peaceful in your life, and your thoughts are peaceful, and everything you eat is pure, and it's out of sort of pain and suffering. Because that's the most important. If it's nothing to do with pain and suffering, like fruits and vegetables, and everything you live your life in that manner, you will tend to see great results and happiness. That's what it is. Now, this is the average mindset of a man, full of 7 deadly sins, what we call them. It's just become part and parcel of human life today. Every you go to work, wherever, you always have to be attached with all these things. The greatest problem actually today, I believe, is lust. Out of all, again, lust leads to wrath. Lust leads to greed and all these things. So it's a primal negative sort of thing. And lust is through sex and sexual temptations, all these desires, grotesque desires, really disillusionments to suffering, and it creates real baggage. The concept of heaven and hell, really, if you think about it this way, is actually a real experience. Just like you go into sleep and you have these negative nightmares, it's the same thing. What will happen is that many people have to enter that state of hell, which probably is true, which I've never seen, but I believe it's true, because every action has a reaction, and every sinful activity we do will tend to be, quote unquote, you have to pay for that suffering, pay for that thing, and you might need to suffer for many years. It's just known as hell, really. Just a part of karma. Not only harming anybody, but even indulgence in lust is also negative. And because you'll need to understand how deep of an attachment lust is and how grotesque that is. But you'll never be able to see it because you're already attached to it. You see, it's only through detachment you'll be able to see how sinful lust is. Same thing for me. Okay, now next slide from SSRF again. It's a pretty good slide. Showing 5 subtle senses. Now what they're saying is that there's this subconscious mind that actually, is observing. So anything we see, and you have a vivid experience, like, whatever it is, your girlfriend or whatever it is, you have vivid experience or whatever it is, and you can remember those things. Anything vivid, like if you had a very sad event, you'll still remember it. So any event that's that catches your attention really deeply, it's already stored in the subconscious mind. And in the subconscious mind, there are impressions build up, right? And the more the impressions and the more negative things we get cluttered to, and the more suffering we tend to have. So the idea is to generate divine sort of energy and destroy all these negative attachments. And one of the methods, obviously spiritual practice, they recommend is known as chanting the name of God. Going through their website, ssrf.org, you'll probably be able to understand much more. But yeah, you can chant the name of God, and what it does, it tends to evoke quote unquote divine energy and destroys all the negative impressions over time, slowly by slowly, and it takes a while. But that's one of their main emphasis. And obviously we've got Hare Krishna guys. I guess you probably know in the West, they're pretty famous, but it's probably dying out now. Yeah, one of their main focus as well was chanting. And yeah, that's the key to it, really. But detachment is the most important aspect. And this is one of the aspects known as bhakti, which is devotion to God. And this is part of it is surrender, as we discussed before. And you got famous guys also doing some stuff like that. So it's taken over the storm in the West. It was a great movement, I think, in spirituality. But it's sort of dying out again. And then there's but this is only one aspect. There are many, many different aspects. And what's the main, key thing that you see in a spiritually developed person is that they're actually happy, like this guy here, these people here, So you'll tend to see that you're happy because without being attached to many things, and that's a key sign of improvement. Now the Bhagavad Gita, it's a very spiritual text, great text. Doesn't have to be from one particular author. It can be from any sort of, any proper really translation would be fine. It doesn't have to be any sort of a particular author that has to be there, but any particular author would be fine as long as it's a decent interpretation. So it talks about all these spiritual truths. Really, that's what it is. It's about a divine truths and how human being can liberate themselves, quote unquote, from and detach themselves from all the negative things. It's got 18 chapters. 18 chapters is known as different yogas, and yoga really is a path of union to divine. It's where they understand of the concept known as, incarnations of divine coming into life. The divine from outside coming into as an avatara, reborning and teachings about the eternal truths about the universe of Dharma. But yeah, all these things are there. It's for you to read through. If you haven't, it's a great book to start. Now the concept of here, we've got this concept known as the Raja Yoga, 8 limbs of yoga. Now this is a great sort of almost like a highway path towards, if you really want to attain spiritual bliss, which is known as, assuming that God is the energy only, but no. The truth is God has in Sanat Dharma, you'll know that there's this concept known as Sat Chit Ananda, which means existence, knowledge, and bliss, especially bliss. Now, divine is understood as a blissful sort of a vibration or blissful energy and all-powerful energy as well. It's part of all the creation that happened. Okay, it's a consciousness that has driven over time, that people have never understood it, and that creation has led to all this natural, universe, whatever, planets, etc. And it's all part of the creation of the mindset of the divine, right? So, in order to attain that stage of known as samadhi or bliss, which is the great happiness stage, like this man. So, there's a great man known as Krishna Paramhamsa, and meant to be a great saint at that time. But the path that this will take you with using the Raja Yoga or the royal path of yoga is through detachment, really, brahmacharya. I can go much more on that, but that really is the key for anything. Like if one who doesn't follow any of this, brahmacharya, it's saying moderation, not really. It's actually complete celibacy of thought, word, and deed. That's what it means. Okay, that's the key driver really for anything. Unless we purify our thoughts, but in order to purify our thoughts, first of all you need to purify your actions, right? So the discipline of action is very important. So that's where we go to self-discipline. So study and devotion. So it's about a particular practice and consistency over time that leads you to be able to what you know as dharana, which means concentration. They don't teach you in meditation camps, but in order to fully develop concentration, proper concentration, one must be able to detach from physical things. And detachment can be done as a practice if you're really keen, but people are not keen. But detachment doesn't mean you need to go and live anywhere in the streets or whatever, but you can just practice, live in your normal life, but try to be detached from, material objects, because they're not real, as you know. These are just man-made illusions. It doesn't take that Doesn't you don't need rocket science to understand that. It's just concept, simple things. So simplicity will lead you towards dharana dhyana, which is proper meditation. Simplicity, truth, and love. Really, these are the primal things. And to understand love is to understand the divine as well. Understand nature is to understand divine. It will help you to understand the divine as well. That is present, sort of, quote unquote, amongst each one of us. And that's the fruit. So in order to attain the fruit, you have to have your proper roots. And these are the roots. And this is like a great example here. So to develop the fruit, to obtain your fruit, obtain bliss, obtain that happiness stage, you must do all this practice. Asanas is like, yoga postures and stuff like that. So it's a very good, showing you the path. And obviously got great people like Gandhi, who's also read through the Gita. So it's a good book. I recommend it. Even Einstein's read the Gita. So if it's not about, if you're a scientist, you don't. It's not that you shouldn't read it, but people who have faith generally do well. I mean, even he read it. So if you think I'm too smart for it, let's say, no, he's probably smarter than you. So if he's read it, then you should do that too. And the next thing is known as, just quickly, on spiritual experience. A spiritual experience is a great thing. It just teaches you that the divine is actually always there, and that it's a divine communication with you. That can only happen through complete surrender, because if divine is everywhere and he knows everything, whatever it is, it's about experiencing the real truth and understanding that yes, there is actually the divine that's always there. People always do prayers, etc., but they have no experience because they never practice properly. Once you do all this practice, like I showed you before, the brahmacharya or whatever it is, all the sincere discipline and sincere dedication, you'll actually have these experiences known as subtle sounds, vibrations, subtle touch, subtle fragrance, subtle taste, or subtle subtle sight, whatever, lights, or whatever they are, through meditation. Especially in meditation you might be able to experience any of these things, and that is really the communion of God with you, and it's saying that you're on the right path. You got to go more and more and more until you enter that stage, which is known as freedom. Okay, and this picture is obviously taken from my own sort of a room, and it's showing a divine light for people who sort of still don't believe in divinity, and it's just there for everyone to have a look. Yeah, thank you very much. I guess that's it for today. Hopefully we've got some understanding now, and thank you very much. My website, I've got a website. It's known as dharmaonline.net. It's not here. It's dharmaonline.net. So have a look at that as well. Thanks very much. Cheers. Bye.